People who watch security cameras for a living, what creepy things have you tried to forget? Worked as a harbor master a while ago. Had to check the marina's cameras after a boat was abandoned at our docks. I was looking for the owner. I looked on the tape from the boat's first night in the marina. The man who had sailed the boat in was standing on the end of his boat for 2 hours, barely moving. Then at 1:30 a.m. he just walked off the back and dropped into the water. He never came back up. Never found his body. Freaky. Saw a chicken walk up the side of a tree at 2 a.m. Was watching CCTV footage of a parking deck, and on the 9th level there's this guy sitting in the middle of the deck, banging his head on one of the pillars. All of a sudden, the guy just stops and runs to the edge. Without stopping or jumping he flings himself over the edge. I immediately called dispatch and told them what had happened. Few days later I was offered counseling for those events. I work in a retail store and for a while I worked security here. Watching the security cameras wasn't technically my job, but we were consistently shorthanded in that department and the manager was grooming me for promotion, so I got to fill in and watch the cameras occasionally. One day when we were reviewing footage from overnights, we saw this teenager calmly set down his shopping basket, take off his hat and glasses, and just charge at a wall. Hit it head on. He did this 2 more times. When he was done, his face was a bloody mess, and he put his hat and glasses back on and just left. Weirded me right the hell out. Was a security coordinator for a large electric company and had access to like 80+ facilities CCTV infrastructures. Was doing maintenance check on some random train station at like 3 a.m., panned a camera as far to the right as possible to check that it was functioning, and this dude was on all fours eating a deer in the middle of the tracks. Watched him for like 10 minutes and went to get the other guy on shift. When I came back, the dude was gone. Rewound it, and the dude stopped munching on the carcass, wiped the gore off his face, and walked into the woods like he didn't have a care in the world. Mostly lots of sex. I've had to turn on the microphone and tell them to stop it or they'll be thrown out of the college gym. I'd have just started narrating in the voice of David Attenborough. And here we observe the mating habits of young Homo sapiens in their natural habitats. Not security cameras per se, but I had a SOC type job monitoring corporate internet usage. We had an image inspector watching people's web traffic, and it would throw up questionable images that someone on the network downloaded onto the big SOC screen. Being a medical related company, there were a lot of breast cancer type traffic that would throw off the porn detectors, which is why we watched in realish time. One time I was sitting at the desk overnight, nobody should have been working, and suddenly the SOC screen turned into a wall of graphic child porn. Some genius took his laptop home, VPN into work, and started browsing so as to avoid being caught by his ISP. He's in prison now. This incident is a large part of why I no longer do that kind of work, or corporate forensics. They make it sound like it's all catching hackers and espionage, but in reality, it's mostly looking at other people's porn. I used to do IT support for a company that had a lot of heavy machinery moving around inside a big warehouse type area. This giant front-end loader would scoop up material and dump it into a hopper. Along the sides of the floor were these huge concrete barriers. I've heard them called Jersey barriers and mafia blocks, but they are about 10 feet tall, and this one guy's life was ended when the front-end loader inadvertently scooped the base of the barrier, and landed on one of 2 guys walking shoulder to shoulder through the plant. I was tasked to review the footage, then make copies, 6 of them to be exact, and then ensure that the footage worked and was self-executable and able to be run from a USB stick. So, I had to watch the footage of this guy get killed over a dozen times. I too was offered counseling for just watching the video. I was working at pub in Sydney and watching the CCTV when I saw a guy continually cross and uncross his legs while playing a poker/slot machine. After a few minutes he walked to a corner of the room, took a crap and proceeded to go back to playing his machine. Talk about being addicted. Not a job but my SO and I have the owlet monitor for our infant looking at his crib and room. It's set up like CCTV and it's creepy to begin with. I wake up at 2 a.m. and I go check on him and I go back to bed. Once in bed I get on my phone to view the monitor just for reassurance, and I see 2 light dots like eyes in night vision in the window of his room. I first crap my pants and I go in the room to check everything out. I can't see anything outside, so I turn on the monitor again, and don't see the dots anymore, so I think it could be a dog or something. I go back to bed and wake up again an hour later to check the monitor, and the dots are effing there again, so I grab a pistol and go outside around his room and check the spot by the window, really ready to have to pull the trigger. Adrenaline is on full blast. I don't find or see anything, but the monkey grass has been mashed down by that window like something sat there for a while. I set up a sleeping bag in my son's room after that for a couple nights, and I checked the monitor so I could see what the night vision caught, but I never saw those lights again. I'm super thankful it was just that, but I was scared. My time to shine. My first job out of college was working for a huge security company, think worldwide big. I was doing electrical engineering and security system design for them. One of the first assignments I had was assisting in writing a report about a security system for a nuclear storage facility we had designed that had been infiltrated by nuns. No joke. Basically, the facility got invaded by octogenarian nuns who started covering the nuclear storage facility in blood they had conveniently provided in water bottles. The footage was jarring in quite a few ways. Didn't find it creepy at the time. I was working at a very small bank, so as the IT person I also had the security cameras all showing on a monitor by my desk, since I had the ability to save videos and burn to DVD if necessary. One day I get called downstairs to help with unlocking accounts/resetting passwords. I go downstairs and the employee had two people at her desk, an elderly lady and her daughter. The elderly lady's husband had passed suddenly, and he always dealt with financial things, so she had no clue. She was always sickly and he was always a pillar of health, so they never bothered teaching her these things. So, we reset her passwords, and I sat with them for about an hour teaching her how to use basic online banking and showing the daughter so they can work things out on their own. They were so sweet, it was really sad, but they were very grateful, and when they left the older woman seems much less intimidated and a little more confident in moving on without her husband. A few days later I found out they were both brutally murdered. The daughter's estranged husband stabbed and shot them both to death, then jumped from a local bridge to his own death. It was stunning, and I immediately sat at my desk and pulled up the video, watching myself have a friendly session with them, talking, calmly sitting there chatting, letting them tell me stories of her husband, some crying and some laughing. All the while I'm silently screaming at the monitor, telling myself to warn them, say something, do something. But of course I can't. This was days old and I am just as helpless now as I was then when I didn't know. Edit. The story is still on the New York Times website. We have an old fountain at my apartment building that has a large eagle statue. One night I had to check the security cameras because of a break-in, and at 2 a.m. I came across footage of about 5 guys taking turns humping the eagle. One of them even stole the Santa hat I had on it. Watched a female employee, in the span of maybe a minute, pick her nose, itch her front junk like a champ, then reverse things up and go whole hand down her crack, scratching. Large lady. Then she pulled up the hand to her face and sniffed. Then inexplicably, she licked the pointer finger. I've seen all manner of weird crap and that one sticks with me. Seen people pee, poop, whatever in the open or in fitting rooms. Or people getting it on in the fitting rooms. Watched several dudes punching the purple clown. Always weird to confront them. Had to apprehend one for spunking on a rack of FUBU. Worst of the pervs are usually following young girls around, snapping photos, thinking no one sees them. And yes, I mean underage, sometimes horribly underage girls. Coworker of mine had to have a guy arrested who was jacking it in the children's section while children were nearby. I was happy I wasn't there for that. I'm not violent, and I'm about 100% certain I wouldn't have done anything more than call the police like she did. It's more the frustration that you want to slap the crap out of someone, and you know you can't do it. People will do crazy stuff when they don't think they're being watched. Finally, something I can participate in. I used to be a security guard and was stationed at an outdoor engine parts manufacturer's world headquarters office. They had a parking lot that was next to the woods, and a man came out of the tree line during the night and was staring at the camera for an hour straight. We had called the authorities to make a trespassing complaint as none of us wanted to go out and confront him. Around the hour mark he suddenly sprinted backwards into the woods. The police never found anyone. Crap creeps me out whenever I think about it. Worked on a campus watching cameras, was doing my hourly check at around 1 a.m. while talking to my buddy who was the on-duty guard. While flipping through the cameras, I passed by one of our entrances and saw some guy standing at the door just staring in. I spotted it and flipped back to said camera, and my buddy and I just stopped talking and looked at each other cause he was gone. I switched to the next camera, which was the exterior camera, and he was not anywhere to be seen. I asked my buddy if he wanted to go check it out. He said, "Hell no." We checked the footage to see if we saw it right, and sure enough he was there, but we could never find him on any other camera at that time. The university I worked at was reportedly haunted, but I don't exactly believe in ghosts. I still don't believe it was one, but it was still creepy as hell, and I can't explain what exactly happened. I have other stories from doing patrols with guards at night, but that's my freakiest night on camera. The closest to a horror movie and real life thing I've ever seen. Some of the patient rooms in our hospital on the psych floor have cameras to help monitor patients, so they don't move around too much or hurt themselves since they are often confused, etc. Obviously the night vision low light camera makes everything look creepy. One night a phlebotomist came running out of a room totally freaking out. We looked at the camera footage to see what had happened. Patient was an old lady. Video shows a dark empty room. The phlebotomist walks in and sees that the bed is empty and thinks they must have moved the patient. At that point, as she turns around, the door swings, and standing behind the door looking at her, what I can only describe as pure hatred in her eyes, is the patient, naked, with her long hair down to her waist. The phlebotomist was scared as anyone would be. She finally managed to say, "Mrs. Shelby, I'm from the lab and I'm here to draw some blood, is that okay?" And the patient just said, "No. Get out." Phlebotomist didn't need to be told twice. We walked over to the room and the old lady was back in bed sleeping as peaceful as could be, never remembered a moment of it. I'm a little late to the party, but here goes. I am a correctional officer on the night shift, so my job involves a lot of watching cameras and performing cell checks. One night I'm sitting in my office around 3 o'clock and some movement on the CCTV catches my eye. I look up and there is this big dude walking through my jail, looking like he was on a mission. The only way into the jail is through the booking room right next to my office, and I was 100% sure nobody had walked past me. So my mind starts racing. Did I leave a cell door unlocked? Has a violent inmate escaped? Our cameras are old and the halls are dark at night, so I couldn't see many details on the guy. Just that he seemed to be scoping all the other inmates out as he made his way through the cell blocks. As I'm trying to process all of this, I see him suddenly stop and change direction, starting beeline straight to my office. With no time to do anything else, I jump up and run over to the door, and get ready for the fight. I waited for what felt like an eternity for this guy to bust my door in, with a full-on adrenaline rush. But he never showed up. I glanced back at the cameras and he was gone, disappeared into the ether. After scratching my head for a minute, I went to review the footage. That's when I realized that there was a glitch in our camera's playback that had caused a half-hour delay, and the guy in the video was just me doing a cell check and heading back to my own office. Never been more relieved in my life. While on a night shift I saw someone sat on a bridge, looked away to call the police, looked up and they were gone, spraying the camera down and saw a spattered mess of human. Now that's one thing I won't forget in a hurry and really want to. Worked security in one of the larger financial buildings in downtown Toronto a number of years back as a control room operator. The complex has hundreds of cameras monitoring the inside and outside of this building, and I spent most of my 12-hour day and night shifts just people watching. It is honestly pretty amazing what people do when they don't think they are being watched, a lot of parking lot sex on weekends for example. During a night shift, I have witnessed someone walk through the PATH system, underground tunnel system connecting many Toronto buildings, covered in blood with an eye popped out, someone eating their own toenails, some following others while discreetly touching themselves, etc. One of the weirder creepy ones though was a man walking through the building in the dead of night, before lockups, slowly, carrying a single balloon. That one got to me. The balloon got to you but not the eyeball? LOL. The eyeball guy was super effed up. I was watching him on the camera while other guards were speaking with him in person before the police came. I think if I was speaking with him face to face it may have been different. The balloon guy just seemed like something out of a scary movie. I can't really speak to why it creeps me out more. Sitting in an ops center in the Mideast, we watched a pair of individuals dig a big hole into the shoulder of the road at 3 a.m. We could only watch because we had to give benefit of the doubt, they could be doing irrigation, at 3 a.m. Hiding from passing cars. We all knew exactly what it was. Watched them dig hole, move stuff inside of hole, fill hole, cover hole. Watched it all through a thermal eye in the sky, but couldn't do a darn thing because ROE was at its crappiest point. We let the local mill know where to find it, and they said they'd check it out the next day. As the sun came up, I watched as people went about their lives walking over this couple 100-pound bomb. Mothers walking kids to school, to mosque, whatever, farmers hauling their produce. Local mills found it all right, it turned their truck into a crater. Thankfully I wasn't on shift to see that bit. Left my dog to do some chore in backyard and came back to find my 8-month-old dog dead in my yard with blood oozing out of her mouth, was too shocked with what happened and as I loved her so much. After 2 days when I felt stable I looked at my home security camera, and saw footage of her being run over by car and how she came to my frequently used chair trying to find me and collapsed there in the yard. Darn, those ninjas cutting onions again. I had to witness a 2-year-old boy get ran over by an 18-wheeler. Was doing IT support for a company that managed small to medium business network infrastructure for third-party companies. We get called to pull footage from one of their locations. I was told the time frames and to grab all of the cameras. I had to watch the download to make sure we pulled good footage. Here's how it went. Little boy is sitting on dad's lap and they are playing. Dad is tickling and chasing little boy around the lobby being silly. Mom finishes and gets up to leave. Hold door open. Little boy continues game, runs straight out the door and into the street. Boy never even knew what hit him. Every tire got him. Was by far the worst thing I've ever seen. The screams afterwards still wake me up. Before you get crazy, I knew what I was getting into. Just not the extent, and how well the camera/audio captured everything. I have multiple kids and one around the same age at the time I pulled the footage. I went home early and just spent time with my family for the rest of the day. I didn't see it, I heard it. I worked for a security company that had microphones dial into our central station when an alarm was tripped, and there we'd listen to the audio of the event and determine if it was legitimate or not, and how to proceed. In theory this cut down on a lot of false positives, like HVAC setting off glass break sensors or a cat setting off a motion sensor. Anyway, the way it worked is that you'd be sitting there, then a little red light would come on under a speaker, and you'd see the account code, example, 2312, under the speaker and listen for a few seconds. Most of the time it was wind or neighbors or whatever. Or somebody coding in too slowly. But once I was sitting there, working my graveyard shift. At 2 to 3 a.m. I hear a door open at account 1932. Okay. I check the history. Normally no activity at 2 to 3 a.m. Motion sensor goes off in the lobby. Nobody's coding in? Motion sensor in the hallway. Still nobody coding in. The owners have dispatch instructions, call us first before we call the police. So I call the 2 numbers for the owners, no answer on either. Listening for a few more minutes I start hearing guttural noises. Like a feral animal. Couldn't place it. But decided to roll the police. Called police dispatch, told them where to go. There are multiple motion detectors and a door violation plus audio of guttural kind of grunting or growling noises. Police advise they'll be there in 10 to 15 minutes. They must have been closer than they thought, because it was more like 5 to 7 minutes. Grunting/growling is louder and more pronounced. At this point I'm pretty sure a stray dog or something is in there. Then I hear the noise grunt, oh crap, and realize I've been listening to a person this whole time. Cops are in the parking lot, turns out it's a guy noisily eating stuff out of the garbage. Like grotesque amounts of noise. It was really disconcerting. I work in the corporate office of a big security company. You might say I watch the watchers. Most people don't know that CCTV control rooms almost always have a camera watching the operator. When something goes terribly wrong or terribly strange, I get to see the footage. The world is full of weird, but 2 events come to mind. We had an employee who worked overnights monitoring CCTV. She stopped making timely log entries, so we looked in on her. She was spending much of her night having an animated conversation with one of the TV monitors. According to her, Her mother talked to her through it every night since she died. Probably the gruesomest thing I've seen is a guy walking into a firing range, calmly loading his weapon and shooting himself in the head. At a previous job I had to control facilities all over North America. One night I received a system security alarm for one of our unmanned stations that was basically in the middle of nowhere. It's a gated station, so the alarm triggers anytime motion is detected. I pulled up the camera and saw a large fire. I began calling the fire department when all of a sudden, a giant ball of flame started moving abnormally across the facility. It took me a few minutes before I realized that it was a person on fire. Unfortunately, the closest emergency response was over an hour away. 4 people died in that accident as a result of road rage. The investigation suggests that 2 vehicles were racing on an old dirt road. The losing car decided to clip bumpers for the infamous police pit maneuver. The leading car swerved but managed to not flip. Instead, they lost control and hit the ditch at 180 km per hour on a dirt road. They managed to travel nearly 400 meters before plowing through our fence and into a very solid metal structure that stopped them instantly. The gas tank ruptured and the car immediately exploded. Last I heard, the other driver was found and charges were pending. Haven't looked into it since. A guy that committed suicide off one of our parking ramps. He walked around the ramp for hours, pacing on different levels, walking around the building multiple times. We never noticed or thought anything was strange until we got the call that he was on the ledge. There was also the guy that was walking along the ledge of the rooftop ramp, talking on the phone. Wind caught him and took him down. At least that's what the police decided was final in the case. He also spent a lot of time on the rooftop, pacing. At one point he was kneeling on the ledge and looked like he was praying for a good 10 to 15 minutes. Another time, we saw this dude and a girl doing a photo shoot on his car on the roof. She was wearing a super short dress with no panties, doing a lot of provocative poses. I saw them get in their car and not move, so I assumed they were doing the nasty, but I didn't have any security on at the time, so just let them be. Some point in the next week a detective came in and asked me to pull some footage / if I saw anything strange. Turns out the girl was 14 and was being forced to do all of this, and he raped her in the car. Beat myself up a lot for that one. I should have gone up there myself and kicked them out or called the police. It's been a few years and I still can't believe I let that happen. He was caught, but I could have stopped it. I was a LEO for about 10 years earlier in my life, and in the beginning, I had a couple of overnight desk duty shifts at a very large federal building, before they hired armed security to handle such. One of the nights I was very tired, it was like 2 to 3 a.m., and was fighting sleep as I had about half the shift left, and one of the screens had this woman standing there at the bottom of the front stairs of the building. She was just standing there, and I remember it was very cold that night, and she had on what looked like a sundress, no coat or anything. I watched for about a minute, and she never moved, and then out of nowhere, she was 3 steps up on the stairs, almost like the camera had glitched and not caught her walking. She stood there for about a minute, literally motionless, and I decided I needed to go see what was going on. I walked out of the door, and it was very windy and bitter cold. I walked toward the stairs and nobody was there. That sent a weird feeling through my whole body. I decided to walk back toward the building, and when I turned around she was standing at the end of the sidewalk near the curb and was just staring at me. I called out and she didn't respond, and then she just took off running across the parking lot neighboring the building, a parking lot that lead to railroad tracks and literally nothing else. I was freaked out, so I went back inside and made sure the darn doors were locked behind me. Never saw her again, and I showed my super when he got in, and sure enough she was on the night's recording too, just standing there in a small sundress in 20-degree winter air. I never forgot that night, and I was wired for the rest of that shift.